I'm Paul Brewer. I'm a husband. I'm a dad. I'm a retired millwright. And I'm a United States Marine.
Thank you for coming to Keeping History on Two Wheels. If you like this video, please subscribe and don't forget to hit that notification bell so that you'll be notified whenever we do an upload. Last week, we started this three-part series speaking with Paul Brewer. We went through his childhood and through his time from the initial entry into the Marine Corps up through his time in Vietnam. We left off at his return home, and today, that's where we're going to pick up. So if you missed last week's episode, click the link in the top corner and give it a watch.
We landed in Miami, and the captain got on and he said, "I'd like to ask for everybody to stay seated." He said, "We got a Marine on here by the name of Joe Brewer, coming back from Vietnam. His mother works for National, and we'd like for him to get off first." So they did. They all stayed seated, you know. Nobody said a word. Well, I got out there, and Mother was out there, and my stepdad were out there, and she had made up some signs. Said one of them said, "My son, a Marine grunt, is home from Vietnam," and I don't know what the other was. There was quite a crowd of people out there, and they all said hey and thanked me and patted me on the back, you know. And I was kind of surprised. We still didn't know about the protest because, you know, they didn't report none of that in Vietnam. Well, the next morning, Mother came in there and woke me up, and when she did, she grabbed my foot. When she grabbed my foot, I come up out of that bed and I kicked, and I just missed her head. Petrified her, scared me. And I told her from then on, I said, "Mother, you come in here to wake me up, just stand at the door and call my name. Just calmly call my name, but don't touch me." And so she did, and that brings back something. In Vietnam, we were out one night. Now, we would lay back, you know, we'd do one guy on, one guy off, be in pairs. And I was laid back and had my rifle laying across my chest. And this guy that was with me, I can't remember his name, he just started shaking my foot. Not saying a word, shaking my foot. And I woke up and I didn't move, and I thought, man, we're had. They're all over us. That's all I could think about. So I eased up, and there was a Black Panther probably 6 feet from us, just standing there. God, it was beautiful. I'm talking about beautiful. And he just stood there and was looking. Of course, there was 12 or 14 of us out there on this patrol.
He was trying to decide which one he was going to eat.
That's what I thought. He was deciding what meal am I going to have right here. So I just eased up and clicked from safe to single shot. And when I did that click, that thing went right over the top of us and it was gone, which I was glad. But another time, I'm sorry to go back, but just thought about this. We had set into some these ruins, you know, like you see in Rambo when he shows these angle ruins. Mm-hmm. We had set in on there, and we were going to move from there when it got dark to an ambush site where it was a company. Well, before it got dark, we looked up and there was a cobra. he come in up there where we were and kind of raised up and looked around, spread out and all that. And I thought, oh, man. I was so, I'm glad we're not staying the night here. That's exactly what I thought. Well, nobody thought to shoot it or do anything to it. And we didn't move that night. We stayed in that night. Nobody slept all night. It wouldn't have done no good because they don't make no sound anyway. If you bitch you, you're dead and gone. You know, that's the way it is. But I just happened to think about that. So anyway, I'm back in Miami. Absolutely should not have been on the street. I was in that mode. I was so happy to be home, back to what I call my hometown. But at the same time, my heart was back with the guys in Vietnam. I missed them. I truly missed them and wanted to be with them. I was just too wild, and I feel like every guy, no matter what service they were, that came back from Vietnam, you've been out of Vietnam 5 days and you're back on the street. I had no business being back on the street. I was glad to be there, but it was wild.
Well, you know, Kelly has told me on numerous occasions that whenever I would come home, I was a totally different person than what I normally would be.
Right.
And she equated it with having a time frame that she could always put things down into kind of like quarters.
Yeah.
And that whenever I would come home, I would be at point A, but she knew within 3 months I'd be at point B.
Yeah.
And then within 6 months I'd be at point C.
Right.
And she said, I enjoy point F a lot better than I enjoy point A.
Yeah. Well, I bet. Yeah.
And so I can understand, and anybody I think that's been deployed can understand what you're talking about your mental position when you come home versus before you left.
Yeah, you're so wired tight, and you haven't had that opportunity to more or less unwire yourself. But what helped me was my friends, but what really helped me was Nancy. Nancy and I dated for a long time in high school, and we were still close even though we had broke up. And she was home from UT, so I hung with her a lot during the day and then with the other guys at night. And but you know, I was still fighting that battle about being home and being back in Vietnam. So when it got time for me to go to DC to go to school, I was overjoyed. I was happy as a lark. Met back John there. We met at the airport, you know, and went over to embassy school and got checked in and all that. And of course, you went, you know, there was some structure in Vietnam, but mostly the structure was up to you. You didn't really see any officers except that, you know, maybe for a briefing or something like that. And we got back to embassy school, man. And you talking about super structured. Well, once I got accepted to school and back in Nam, I had to fill out a bunch of paperwork for top secret clearance.
Mm-hmm. SF-86.
Mm-hmm. So when I got home, mother and dad and everybody and all the people that I talked to, they'd all been interviewed. And speaking about mother, I forgot. When I got medevac twice, but when I got medevac the second time, they didn't pick me up on the roster as being medevac from the field. And so dad said, they come home one day and there was a green car sitting across the road, just sat there, didn't do nothing. And he said, you know, they kind of wondered and looked at it. He said, they come home the next day and it was there again. He said, but this time, Marine major got out with a chaplain. And he said, man, mother, you know, she just lost it. They had come and told him that your son's missing in action. And of course, you know, it didn't
Tears
go.
the family apart.
Yeah. And so Dad said, Mother, after they left, she went in there and she started packing a bag. And he said, Georgia, they nicknamed her name was Miriam, but they called her Georgia because she was from Georgia with that accent. And he said, Georgia, where are you going? She says, I'm going to Vietnam. I'm going to find my son. And he said, you know, you can't go there. You can't do that. Well, a couple of days later, they got a call that said, hey, he was in the hospital. He's okay. He's doing all right. So everything kind of calmed back down. So anyway, when we got to embassy school, and man, it was regimented. It was day to day to day to day. Well, there was a lot of social classes. There was a lot of military classes, and especially about guard classes, about working for the Department of State and the interaction with civilians and all that kind of stuff, you know. And they of course, at school we had a close crop haircut, but they said when you get on the duty, we want you to let your hair grow just a little bit, so you don't stick out so much, you know. So we said, okay, we kind of understood that. But we had a lot of classes about different things. And one of the classes, they told us, they said, there's two things that we do not want you to get into on the duty. That's politics and religion. Said they never end well. So I always remember that. I stayed, we all did well, stayed away from that. But the thing about embassy duty, you've got all these counselor offices and all these embassies all over the world. If there's a country, we got representation there and we got Marines there. The Marines are the only ones that guard all the embassies and stuff throughout the world. And so we went on through and had PT and all that kind of thing. And what was neat about PT, the school was at headquarters Marine Corps, and it ran behind Arlington Cemetery and had that little 4-foot high wall. So while you're running that 3 miles every day or 5 miles, you're looking down into Arlington. Man, it was beautiful. So they had done the investigations and all that kind of stuff. And then you had 2 interviews. The first interview was a senior State Department official, the executive officer of Marine Security Guard Battalion, and the Master Gunnery Sergeant, who's an E9, who was chief instructor. The next time you got interviewed would be by another senior State Department official. You would get interviewed by the commanding officer of the school and the sergeant major of the school. So that, you know, you went through this thing. And so I noticed right off the bat that when I sat down, there was a file about that thick sitting there. I had enough sense to know that that was my background check. And so we get in there and they ask you all these questions and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, they did different things, and they really didn't get too personal on the first interview. It was kind of more generic about, you know, yourself and where you're from and what you do. And the second interview that I had, of course, it's opposite. You know, some guys had the interview I had first and the other one next, you know. So anyway, when I met with the battalion commander and the battalion sergeant major, it was straight to the point, and with the guy from state. And so they asked me a question, and as soon as they asked that question, I knew they already knew the answer. The first question, the sergeant major said, well, Sergeant Brewer, do you smoke? Corporal Brewer hadn't been promoted that month, this next month. Corporal Brewer, do you smoke dope in Vietnam, didn't you? And I said, no, sir. He said, you're a liar. I said, I am not a liar. I said, I don't like that. And I don't smoke dope. I don't do dope. I don't smoke at all. It's a nasty habit. And I guess that sufficed him. He wanted to see my reaction, I'm sure. So the CO said, if you're out on the duty, would you sleep or have sex with a married woman? Well, I knew that I was messing. They knew I was messing with John's wife the whole time I was home, which was my best friend. That was a sad state of affairs. But anyway, I looked at him straight down and I said, sir, if she pulls that skirt up, we're locked in. And they asked some other questions, and I went out and I saw John, and he said he had been in front of me and I didn't see him, but he said, "What do you think?" I said, "Well, I believe I'm homeward bound, brother, to Miami, Florida. I don't believe I made the cut." He said, "Well, I think I made it." Well, see, John, he did dope and all kinds of crap. So the next day, we're back in this in our classroom, huge, held like 150, 200 people, you know. It wasn't no regular classroom. This was a classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, if I call out your name, step out in the hall. So they went down and they called out, you know, it's alphabetical again. They called out his name, told him to go to the hall, called out my name, told me to stay in my seat. So I'm thinking, trying to figure it out, you know, am I a go or a no-go? So after they finished calling out the names, they said, all of you guys that are in here, congratulations, you made the duty. Well, I was excited. And of course, John didn't, so they transferred all them out. Well, they have this huge, huge library at the school. And it's got a book in there, a big 3-ring binder, really, of all about each duty post. And at that time, they had broke the world down into 5 different companies. Well, in one of the classes, they gave everybody at the same time, you put on some headphones, and they gave you a language test, a fake language.
D-Lab.
D-Lab, there you go, thank you. And so we took that D-Lab test, and then the next day they come around and separated the group again, and they said, all you guys that are left, you passed the language test. So we're going to send you for 4 weeks to the Foreign Service Institutes where all the diplomats go to language school. And pay attention. There'll be a test. And so I went to school. This is simplistic, Paul. I've always been that way till I met this beautiful lady. I met a girl from Belgium in there. But the key was when you got on the bus at school in the morning until you got off the bus at night, you had to speak the language that you were taking. Well, I had taken 2 years of French in high school, and I liked French. So I said, well, I'll take French. So I met at lunch one day. I met a girl from Belgium. I really didn't meet her. We passed and talked and all that. Man, she was a knockout. So Brussels, Belgium. So you got to pick 3 places in the world that you would choose for be assigned to. Because we were in that top % of the class, I reckon. I don't know. So my first choice was Brussels. My second choice was Hong Kong. And I forget where my third choice was. But I didn't choose Central or South America. I wasn't going down there. I didn't want to be in all that mess, you know, the language and the terrorists and all that crap. And I had toyed with the idea of asking for Vietnam because we had them in Saigon and in Hue and all that stuff. And I said, well, I've seen Vietnam. Belgium will be my first choice. So we went through school and passed the test, and the executive officer at the school was fluent in French, so he sat in on our French test and everything. And it was a good time. So school's over. We got our certificate from the language school and all that. And I'm diddy-bopping past down the hallway one day. The new class had started. And Master Gunnery Rappo, he called me in. He said, Brewer, get in here. So I went in there and reported to him. He said, go to supply and draw your loincloth and spear. And I said, oh, hell no. He said, go to supply and draw your loincloth and spear. He said, I got your orders here. I said, no, you got to be kidding. That ain't what I chose. He said, well, smart ass, what did you choose? I said, Brussels. He said, here's your ticket. You leave in the morning. So anyway, I got my orders and flew to Brussels. And it was on a Wednesday night. I left out of New York, flew from Washington to New York, got on a 707 and flew to Brussels. And man, I was excited. I And they had told us in school, look, when you make your choice, and we tell you that's where you're going, and they would tell you like 2 weeks ahead of time or so. No, I lied somewhere in there. Didn't mean to. I remember he called me the day before I went. But when I told him I wanted to go to Belgium, and everybody told him where they wanted to go, they told us, go to the library, pull that book, associate yourself with that book, and we advise you to write your NCOIC. So I took that literally to heart. So I wrote a letter to First Sergeant Polk and introduced myself, and told him a little bit about myself and that I was excited to be able to join the detachment in Brussels. And so I got to Brussels on that Thursday morning at 7 o'clock. And Gary Martin, Staff Sergeant Martin, and Sergeant Watts, Steve was from Miami, Gary was from Oklahoma somewhere. They picked me up at the airport. I got off at that airport, and man, NATO was there. So all the Marines have to be single. Mm-hmm. And all the secretaries at NATO and the embassies are all single. I looked around that thing and I thought to myself, good Lord, have mercy. So got there, Gary and Steve met me and everything. And I said, wait, before we leave, I got to make a phone call. So it's 1 o'clock in the morning in Miami. I called Mother on the phone and I said, I'm here. I have arrived. I know what heaven looks like. I said, it's loaded with good-looking women and hot pants and halter tops with no bra. I'm home. She said, you're stupid, and hung the phone up on me.
So we have gone through the first visit to Vietnam. We've gone through embassy school in your initial days at
Brussels.
Belgium. Okay. So, if I'm not mistaken, your mom came to visit you in Belgium, didn't she?
She came twice.
Okay.
My dad came with her one time. Mm-hmm. And first time Mother came, it was in December. Cold. It's cold there because if you look at it, it's up above Maine as you come across. And but it's beautiful no matter what the time of year it is. But you can count on it to snow about Marine Corps birthday time, which is November 10th, and it'll snow clean through till the middle of April. Mm-hmm. But you learn how to dress for it and live for it. But the highlight about Brussels, we covered the embassy, and then we covered NATO. Mm-hmm. We had two different houses. The embassy Marines, which I was a part of, we lived at one house, and the guys for NATO lived in another house. And they had the bigger house because they had the bar that we used every Friday night. It was a huge bar. We had a big party because we could have 300 to 400 people on a Friday night come in and have a good time. I was very fortunate in Brussels. When I got there, First Sergeant Polk, who later became Sergeant Major of the battalion, he took a liking to me, and I got picked. I'm sure he had it done. I got picked as one of 2 Marines to supplement Secret Service detail in times a dignitary would come to Europe. And so there was a lot of good people. With Brussels being NATO headquarters, we had a lot of people come visit. Wheels, senators, Secretary of State, President. At that time, the ambassador was John Eisenhower, Dwight's son. And of course, you had David Eisenhower married Julie Nixon, and you had all them coming and going and stuff. So we had a lot of interaction with them. But the highlight was being selected to be part of Richard Nixon's trip in 1970. I think it was 70. It might have been 69. I don't know. But I picked them up in Yugoslavia. Flew with them throughout that time. Got to meet Henry Kissinger, amongst others. But the highlight of that was that trip. we got there, and one night, somebody always had to man the gate with the Yugoslavs. They had absolute control of all the security of it. So one of the Marines, whether it was from that detachment or me or the other guy, augmented. One night I was out there on the gate, and Secretary of State Kissinger come in. He rolled the window down, and he's, "Sergeant Brewer, you all right?" And I'd say, "Yes, sir." He said, have you had anything to eat?" And I'd say, "No, not yet," or "Anything warm?" So he went on in. About 10 minutes later, they come out there with some hot food and coffee and all that kind of mess. It was kind of neat. He was a cool man. He's very straightforward. But one night there, we were there 3 or 4 nights. I was back in the big room, in the security room with Secret Service, and a top secret message come in. And I had been interviewed by Joe McNulty, who was head of the Secret Service for Europe, before I was officially picked. And he asked me, could you shoot somebody? And I said, well, I don't have a problem with that. I'm a Vietnam Marine. And he said, well, all I ask, if you have to shoot somebody, is make sure you kill them. He said, because a dead man cannot dispute anything you say. So I was like, hey, all right, brother, I'm locked in. So this one night I was back in there, and they called me over, and they were having Tito, who was president of Yugoslavia, was having a big bash for Nixon and Kissinger and all the wheels, you know. So they said, we got a top secret message for Dr. Kissinger. You put it in his hand and his hand only. I said, okay. So I went out and got in the driver's car, which was attached to the embassy. And it was an Arab guy in there. And of course, at that time, the relations with the Arabs wasn't real good. So got in the car, and they told him where we needed to go. Well, we're driving along, and then he stops at this intersection of a main road and this side road we were on. And I said, you need to go. He said, we got to wait for the motorcade. I said, no, we need to go, and we need to go now. And he said, I'll wait. So I took out my .38. I told him in the head, if you don't drive now, I'll drive myself. So he drove off. Well, I got out there, and I gave the note to Dr. Kissinger. And I stood there while he read it, and I asked him, did he need anything? And he says, no, I got it handled. So I dismissed myself, got back in that car, and drove back. And that driver said they wasn't going to drive for me again. He quit. So they asked me what happened. I told them. I said, he wouldn't go. I said, you know, the guy's Arab. He refused to go anywhere, and I didn't know what he had up his sleeve. And he said, what would you have done? I said, I'd have killed him right there on the spot. No ifs, ands, buts about it. And so at least that turned out well, without a problem.
Yeah.
But we had Mamie Eisenhower with Dwight, with John being the son. She was a real piece of work. That's all I'm going to say about it. She was just mean and freaking hateful. And he was good, except when he had been drinking. Then he was an ass. And but you know, that's the way it was. But Brussels was a great duty. I got to travel a lot, see a lot, enjoyed it, met a lot of good people, and had a lot of good times.
I remember some of the conversations at the house.
Uh-oh.
And I do believe that there was a situation at one time when your mama ended up sitting at Eisenhower's desk, wasn't it?
Yeah. I took her up there to introduce her to him, and she made herself comfortable, which Mother always did, you know. And he walked in, and I told her she needed to get up, and he just held his hand out to me like, don't worry about it. So he talked to her, and they had a good talk, and we took a picture with it. But I think the one that you may be thinking about was the graduation party at Embassy School, when we went up to change out of our blues, because they always had a big picnic party. And she was sitting in the chief instructor, Master Gunnery Sergeant Rappo. She was sitting in his chair and his desk, propped up like a queen.
I remember something about feet up on a desk.
Yeah, she had her feet up, and I told her, Mother, you got to get out of here, and you got to get out of here now. And he was standing beside me, and he told me to dismiss myself, that my mother could sit there as long as she wanted to, and for me to mind my own business. So they ended up at the party having a pretty good time together and all that. And the thing about that, he ended up going to Rome later on, about 3 or 4 months later, and relieved the whole entire detachment in Rome. They were running a cat house on the side. So he brought Marines in from all of Europe to fund down there, but he was a really good man. I liked him a lot.
Okay, so we're kind of going through the whole Europe embassy thing, and from Europe, you came back to the States, correct?
Came back to Camp Lejeune for a year, and spent a year there with 6 Marines. Wasn't much going on. We did a NATO cruise out of there, gone for 3 months, and that was a lot of fun. It was interesting. Some places that I had not seen that I got to see. And then we rolled around, and in September of '72, I got orders to go back to what the Marines call Westpac, which is the Western Pacific, which takes in all the Far East in there. Mm-hmm. And the good part about that was my commanding officer in B Company, 1st Battalion, 4th Marines, was a man called Higgins, Colonel Higgins. He was a captain then, Captain Higgins, great man. Commanded respect just by his actions and his deeds and all that, but he was also loved his Marines. And we spent about 60 to 90 days, I don't remember, off the coast of Vietnam. It was during the POW release. The night they released the first POWs out of Hanoi, we were at 100%, everything packed up, ready to go on board ship in case something happened. And we did, in fact, the next night we were home, and then third night we loaded an LPH, the USS Guadalcanal, which is a helicopter carrier. And we were on there, and we sailed and went off the coast of Vietnam for, like I said, 60 to 90 days. And part of that time was flying missions back into Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and all that, looking for POWs, Marine POWs and stuff. And but one of the missions was things were really going bad over in Phnom Penh, and there was a large contingency of embassy people there for all the different governments. So Colonel Higgins got called in and was assigned to put together the details for an evacuation flight into Phnom Penh, into a soccer stadium. And he hand wrote it out. And I was the only enlisted Marine that was aboard ship right then that had a top secret clearance. And so I got into a little room, and I typed out the whole order sequence for flying in and out of Phnom Penh. And he was a wonderful man. He ended up coming out of there early. He was assigned to the officer selection board, but later on through the years, back in about 79, 80, he was a colonel on the UN forces in Lebanon. And he got kidnapped by that group there, the Hezbollah. And they tortured him, and they beat him, and they finally hung him and killed him. And they kept his body for a year or so, and then they dumped him on the side of the road like a piece of trash. And I've never forgotten that. It's pissed me off all these years. And I'm still not happy about it, because he was a good, honorable man. And he was married to a Marine. And but that was the best part about that trip. We stayed off of there, and we pulled into Hong Kong and stayed there a week. And Higgins came to me. He said, "We're supposed to give one Marine to shore to work with the British Marines on shore patrol. And since you were on embassy duty," he said, I'm assigning you to it. And I said, okay. So I got to stay out in town and go with them guys and everything. That was a lot of fun.
The British are fun.
They were fun. And I mean, we had some good times.
I've got some good friends of mine with the British engineers.
Yeah.
And
Oh man, they're a hoot now.
Listen,
let me tell you.
and it's not just the British. The British engineers are made up of Scots.
Yeah.
And everything. And out of a whole bunch of them, the Scots are the funnest.
Oh yeah, boy, they take into that drinking and fun. They take it seriously, buddy. Let me tell you. And so anyway, we pulled into the Philippines. We're supposed to stay there 3 or 4 days. I don't remember. It wasn't long. We ended up staying there 3 months. The ships pulled out and pulled back in. We stayed 3 months. We loaded up, went back to Okinawa, and then that tour was over. And I got orders to go to Marine Drill Instructor School at Parris Island, South Carolina. And as far as I'm concerned, that was the best duty I had. I loved that duty. School was rough. I thought I was in somewhat physical shape to go to school, and that was nowhere near being right. They treat you in school, or they did then, and I assume they probably still do. School puts you exactly through day by day of day 1 to day 77 of the training regime and graduation. It takes you back to know everything that you got to teach recruits to do throughout all that. And the instructors treat you like a recruit. Mm-hmm. And, but school was tough. It was a lot of academics. You know, the Marine drill manual is probably that thick. And every week you would have to learn a different movement. The instructor would hold out a piece of paper. You would draw what you draw was what you got, you know. And he'd stand there. Of course, he didn't have to look at the paper. They knew it by heart. But when we had to recite it and teach it just like that paper said, exactly, you know, the position of attention is such and such, and you know, it in every minute detail, and tell them, you know, forward march, forward is preparatory command, march is the command of execution. You take 1 12-inch step forward with your left foot. So you had to learn every single piece of the drill manual, and I did. And but first, we started out with 196 guys, and we graduated, I think 70, 72, something like that, 69, 72. Mm-hmm. And the first inspection we had, the first inspection we had in embassy school was the barracks came in, of course, went both directions. And they didn't even get, I think John Bannon was like 6th and I was 7th, and that way to the right. And they never did get to me and John. They held cards up about, you know, your socks are 3 inches, your underwear's 5, all that kind of space and all that. And they were throwing stuff everywhere for not being right. You got down to me, and our ties are supposed to be within 1/2 inch of each other. Mine was off by 1/8 of an inch. He cut my tie, cut it in half. Well, DI school was, there was a lot of inspections about your clothing and how to wear your clothing and all that. But we had our first PT session, and it started out, you know, doing pull-ups was fine. We got over and did all these calisthenics, and it was, before we even got through with calisthenics, man, I was exhausted. I was whipped. I thought, man, I ain't, you know, this is crazy. So we made 1/4 mile lap around this dirt track, and 90% of the class didn't make it. When I finally got through over there, after about, you know, 3/4 of the way around, I crawled the rest of it on my hands and knees. And we got up into the showers, and everybody was having cramps, you know, trying to stand up and hurt. Right. And we all laughed about that. And of course, you know, it did get better, but DI school was very strenuous. It was very physical. Your graduating run was a little over 5 miles. It was called a tour of the island. Mm-hmm. And you left DI school and would go by the WM barracks and all around 1st Battalion, 2nd Battalion, the Confidence Course.
Down by the golf course.
Yeah, and all out through there and come back in the back way around. And that was your final PT run, and that was really your final test for being physically ready to go. Mm-hmm. So I got assigned to B Company, and when I got over there, man, I was tickled to death. I knew 4 or 5 of the guys in the series that I got assigned to.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was tickled. I had known them from Camp Lejeune, so it was like a homecoming in a lot of ways. And for my first platoon graduation, which was in June, Mother and Dad flew up to be there for my first graduation. And that was an exciting time for me because I didn't get in at the pickup phrase. I got there like 10 days into their new training cycle, but I got to go through all the rest of it. And seeing them kids, how they turn out, was awesome. The funny part is we have, I don't know if they still do, but we have what we call the hog board. We would encourage the recruits to ride home and get a picture of their girlfriend and put up on that board. And they'd all participate. But the bad thing is they get picked on by them ugly girlfriends too, or the big fat girlfriends, you know. And all through the graduations, you'd see at graduations, them guys, some of them would be so embarrassed they wouldn't talk to their wife or girlfriend. And now that did make me feel bad for about 5 seconds, and then I'd laugh and chuckle about it. It's just mind over matter. It's just teaching them, you know. And but man, that DI, being a DI was awesome. I remember, and this we talked about. I'd been a recruit, 1st Battalion, and the hickory nuts had cured me of that. And so, man, I just loved every part of the training, especially teaching and everything. And getting mail call with them kids and filling them letters. And it's amazing there back at that time, which was late 73, 4, and 5. I got out in June of 75. They would try to put drugs in the envelopes and send them. When you'd fill the envelope and if it had something in it, you'd make them open it right there. But they got the mail the same. You'd call their name, they'd run up there, you'd hold it out, and they'd slap their hands together, and they'd back up and go, "Aye, aye, sir, step ease," you know, doing about face and be gone. And they'd be, some of them would send in some really sexual pictures of themselves to their boyfriends or whatever. And I'd always laugh because we'd have to see them. And I'd tell them, I know it might be personal and all that, but hey, I got to see it. If I don't have my initials on it, it's contraband. You have a choice: either I sign them and you keep them, or we throw them in the trash. Mm-hmm. And so, but we had one platoon in particular. It was 160, I think. Most of them were boys from up north. One kid was, we had some good old Southern boys from Georgia and Alabama, old stump pulling boys. But this particular platoon, it was me and Hubbard and L.C. Williams, and it had a lot of blacks in it. We don't call them blacks. We call them light green and dark green, which I like that. You know, we're all Americans. We should be. But anyway, Johnson had been working in the steel mill since he was a kid. He was a flipping monster. He had more discipline than anybody I'd ever seen in my life. He was the guide, and we had 4 good squad leaders that were tough guys. And so one night, I forget what Johnson had done. He had made me mad, and I told him to stand on line until I tell him to go. Well, I forgot about him. I got up next morning, that kid's still standing on line. I told Hubbard, I said, man, that's our honor man right there. Got to be our honor man, you know. And he was, in fact, honor man.
That honor grad?
Mm-hmm. He was our honor grad for our platoon. But I only had one recruit that shouldn't have graduated to me, but it wasn't up to me. He just didn't cut the mustard. And in one of the platoons, it's always a senior, a heavy A, which is heavy-handed, and does most of the teaching and discipline and all that, and then another A. And according to what was SOP back then, only the senior could PT the whole platoon at one time. That thing went out the window. Man, they'd make me mad, really almost all of us. You know, I'd PT the whole platoon. If I got caught, I got caught. I guess that was just the way it was going to be. Mm-hmm. And But this guy, he had, it was me, him, and Trunzo. Trunzo was the senior. And we come in the next morning, and one of the recruits came up to me and asked permission to speak to me. And I said, yeah. And he showed me a picture. The guy was dancing with the recruits. They'd taken a picture of it. I took it in there and gave it to T, and I said, you need to look at this. And boy, he was, you could have burned egg on his head. They went to Sirius Commander, and they relieved him of the field and went on. You know, it just wasn't what to do. But I told one of the first platoons, gave him a lesson on showing, and told him to, you know, you shave every hair on your face. I didn't do an outline. I just said every hair on your face. Man, this kid come out with a towel, a white towel that was blood red. I snatched that towel and asked him why. He had shaved his eyebrows. And I asked him, well, what in the world is wrong with you? Not in that language either. And he said, well, you know, the drill instructor said shave every hair on your face, so I did. And I said, no, we ain't talking about that. So from then on, I'd use a magic marker and pull somebody up there and show them about shaving, you know. And but that was always fun. And we had one time, one of the platoons we picked, as a matter of fact, talking about pickup, our next door neighbor in Beaufort, Mike and I can't remember, Carol, he was a young Marine. He'd gone to Penn State and come in as enlisted, and Carol was from Penn State, and they were good people. Carol told me one time she wanted to come to pickup, and I said, no, you don't want to come to pickup. Trust me, you don't want to come to pickup. She said, I want to come. I said, okay, pickup's going to be on such and such night. We usually picked up on Friday nights, you know. And so I said, be there before 5 o'clock. So she came. She didn't speak to me for 2 weeks after pickup. When she finally did, she was mad about us yelling at them kids. I said, well, all I can tell you is I'm glad you didn't see what went on at the barracks. Because when we'd run them to the barracks, they were in the new barracks. The wooden barracks had all been torn down. Right. And they had these really nice new barracks that were air conditioned, heated, had washer and dryer. I mean, it was nice. And the polished concrete floors. Well, we'd take, new platoons always go to the top, and then they feed down in seniority. So we'd take whisk, laundry wash, and spray it all at the back door. So when they hit that concrete, buddy, they busted their ass. They hit, and we'd be right there in their face, screaming and yelling, and just, what are you doing on the ground? Yeah. Get up! Does your mother have any kids that lived? And all this other kind of stuff. There's a story in that too. And so, in one platoon, you know, we wore our ribbons and all that, and them ribbons can get expensive. Yeah, yeah. And I had this kid. Last time I did my blues uniform, it cost me over $1,000. Oh, it's crazy. To outfit the whole thing. And I was in this kid's face and had my Smokey touching his head, and I was going off on him, and that kid puked all over me. Man, I doubled in red. I was so mad. Well, I can't remember the other drill instructor right now. They called him Mad Dog. That kid puked, and he reached down, and he said he didn't, but I know he did. I saw it. Scooped up a piece of potato and ate it, and man, that kid's puked again. So, of course, I had to change uniforms and buy new ribbons and all that stuff. But speaking about, you know, we punish them all the time, but the punishment was punishment, but it was also building them up physically for all the physical activity. Right. And I got on this kid one time. I brought him up to the quarterdeck, because by then it had changed. It was all one straight line, two sides, where you could stand at the quarterdeck and look down and see everybody. And I called this kid up there, and I was getting on him. Man, I was ready. I love being an A. I didn't care much about being a senior, but I love being an A. And I'm in his face, and I said, I bet your mama died the day you were born. And man, that kid spazzed out. We had to call and send him to medical. His mother really did die. Oh, wow. When he was born. Now, I felt bad about that for about 5 minutes. And then, you know, it was all over with. But I felt bad about that. And then another time, we graduated a platoon twice. We would graduate a platoon that day. But the night before, we would pick up a new platoon. There were so many kids coming in during that time. And so I told Hubbard, I stayed with him about 3 series. I told Hubbard, I said, man, I'd rather stay back in the barracks with the new guys if you don't care. And he said, that's fine. And so one time I was PTing them, and I'd run them back to the rack, get one pillowcase. They'd come out, and I'd say, throw it in the middle. Go get your top sheet, throw it in the middle. Go get your bottom sheet, throw it in the middle. Go get your blanket, throw it in the middle. Go get your shoes out of your rack, throw it in the middle. Go get 6 pair of underwear, all just everything out and throw it in the middle. Then I'd say, school circle quarter deck. And they'd run up there and make them run through all that mess. School quarter rear deck, run them back and forth, and got it all mixed up real good. And then I'd say, you got 10 minutes to clean this mess up. And it'd take them a week to get each other's clothes back to them. They'd pass it back and forth. And it was funny, but a lot of it was, playing mental games with them.
Yeah.
And then one time I had a kid, I actually had 2 kids die in recruit training. One died of heat stroke. And
well, it is,
yeah. And then
South Carolina.
Hot. And you had to be up to date on what day it was. You had hot sop and cold sop. And in hot sop, they'd put up flags. And then you'd have to know, they had flags all around, and you better know what training day it is, how many recruits are there, what flag condition, because the inspectors would come by and ask you that.
Mm-hmm.
And so when there was black flag, nobody could train.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I had this kid one day, and I was raising havoc. It was the first full day we had them. I was raising cane. And I looked back there, and I told him to get on line, and there's a yellow line painted down each side that your toes stand on. And I looked down there, and I saw this kid back at the rack, and I'm screaming at him, and he ain't paying me no attention. Now I'm really getting mad. So I go down there, and the kid's beating his head against the side of the rack, just as hard as he could beat it. I turned him around and hollered at him, and he didn't answer me, but he grabbed me by my collars. And so I grabbed a hold of him, and I realized the kid couldn't hear me. But I was thinking to myself, can he really not hear me, or is he just playing with me? So I took him up to the quarter deck, told the others to stand there and shut up. I called over to sick bay and said, you need to send me somebody over here now. I got a kid I think's tone deaf. So they came over there and put one of them tuning things. He never moved. He was so scared he blocked his hearing, and they got rid of him. So we went in, and when you went to chow, whether it was breakfast or lunch or dinner, you could not tell them to get up and leave. They were supposed to have 30 minutes to eat. Supposed to was the key. So we always told them, and every drill instructor had something different. But I told them, when I got you, when I pick up that smoky and put it back on my head, that's your key to get up and get your ass moving and get out of this mess hall. Mm-hmm. But if you go back and get you a glass of milk, you'll pay for it. So you'd always have that one that would go back and want to get that extra thing of milk, especially in the summer. And I'd march them till we cleared, because the mess hall was next to battalion headquarters. I'd march them till we got cleared out, and then I'd run them till they puked.
Yeah.
And I said, every time you do that, I don't care if it's 1 or 10, I'm going to run you till you puke.
Yeah. I remember in my basic training, we came in through the chow hall door. We went down the line, then hung a right. That's where your milk and everything was. Mm-hmm. And then you hung another right, and you filled in the chairs by going from the furthest to the nearest. And the area that was at the end, like if you hung that right and you came down to where the milk and everything was, if you looked straight ahead, that was the snake pit. And that's where all the drill instructors were. Yeah. And when the recruits would get there first thing, they had civilian clothes on, and they'd feed them first.
Mm-hmm.
And so they brought them in. They had already told them, you make a right, you make another right, you go all the way to the end, and you sit. And you don't eat until until the last person is sitting at your, is standing at your table. Then you sit down, give the nod, and you go ahead and eat. And so this kid, I'd been in basics now for a couple of weeks, and I saw these guys come in, and this kid makes that right, goes and gets his milk and everything, and instead of making a right to go fill in, he accidentally walked right into the snake pit.
Oh, man.
And when he walked in, he looked around like that, and he goes, and he turns, and when he turned to go where he was supposed to go, they were on him like white on rice. Oh no, Airman, come here. Come sit with me. We're going to have lunch together. And I mean, they all every drill instructor in there got up from this table, walked over, and then they all just, they were spinning chairs around and sitting down with him and everything. And the kid started throwing up. I mean,
he knew what was coming.
You're going to clean this up. And I mean, it was just nonstop.
Yeah. And
I felt so sorry for him, but we were all just sitting there dying.
Oh, yeah. Glad it wasn't me.
Yeah.
I had a train of thought, but I forgot it. But one time I took them, they were a good platoon. We'd been out drilling and all that, and man, it was terrible. So I marched them to the chow hall, gave them the left face, and they march up the door and give them squad halt. Then we'd say, form for chow, and they would intermend to 2 lines. The guide would go up and open the door and hold the door open. And so we'd tell them, when you go through that line, you sidestep and your eyes are looking straight ahead. If you see something that you want, you put your tray out and they'll put it on there. You pull it back, sidestep. If you don't want it, you don't put your tray out, and go on through like that. And then, of course, you had what we call fat bodies, and then we had underweights. Mm-hmm. We'd put them together and feed them more and feed them less and stuff.
Right.
But one time I marched them up, and it was for evening chow. I marched them up to the door. I went in, signed them in, walked out, gave them reform for march, about face, and off we went. Mm-hmm. Of course, if I'd have got caught, I'd have been hung up by the neck. But every platoon was different, but each one was great. I got relieved. Me and Hubbard, there was 12 of us. 3, 6, 9, 12. No, there might have been closer to 8 or 10, thinking it out. We were out all in the same series. We had graduated a platoon, and we was in like the 3rd week with this new platoon. The chief drill instructor of the company come out there and called out our names and told us to come over, so we went over there. He said, "You're all relieved of duty. Go home. Don't come back till I call you to come back." And we're like, "What are you talking about?" He said, "You're all under special court-martial. You've been accused of taking money from recruits." Well, I knew that never happened with me and Trunzo and Hill, the guy, that's his name, who called him Mad Dog. And I knew it never happened with me and Hubbard and L.C. Smith or with Eddie Campbell. And so I didn't sweat it too much. So I was home, a good 45 days. He called and said, "Come in," called a bunch of us in, He said, "I need y'all to go to Elliott's Beach to test recruits today and then go back home." So we said, okay. So we did that and went back home. A few days later, he called again and said, "Y'all all need to come in." So we all went in, and that's when they told us that we were going to be special court-martial for soliciting money from recruits. Well, they, Brown, Sergeant Brown, he happened to be black. He was the first guy, good guy. He went in there, and man, they railroaded him right on into the brig, cut his hair, all that kind of stuff. His daddy was there. His daddy was fit to be tied, which and so the next day was L.C. Hubbard. And he and I had been friends for a year up at Lejeune, and now I'd worked for him here, and we were good friends. He was a dark green Marine, good man. They called him in and started his trial, and I was sitting there, and Barbara, his wife, was sitting next to me, and then somebody else. And anyway, man, I'm deeply breathing. You know, I didn't realize it, but I was nervous. Did not realizing how nervous I was. And I happened to look over, and I looked over there, and Barbara had a pistol in her pocket. But now, buddy, I've gone from 1 to 101, knowing I'm gonna go to jail forever. She's got a gun. She's gonna kill somebody, and you know. Mm-hmm. Well, it was terrible. They were railroading Hubbard, and he had an illustrious career in the Marine Corps. So we broke for lunch, and we come back in there, and as we went back in there and sat down, these 3 black attorneys come walking in there. And buddy, let me tell you, they were decked out. They looked sharp, had them briefcases. They went up there, introduced themselves to the judge, and said, "We are now representing Staff Sergeant Hubbard in this case, and we will represent all these Marines in this case." So the judge took a time out, and he went in the back. What we figured he did, and he did it several times, what we figured he did was call back to CG and tell him, "Hey, look, you know, this is what's happening. This is what's going on." Because, man, they were eating everything up. And they got up there, and they were interviewing. They didn't bring any of the recruits back. What had happened before we graduated that last series, this drill instructor made a recruit drink ammonia. Well, it like killed him. Mm-hmm. So that kid, they rushed him to the hospital and saved him and got him fixed and everything. And he told him about him making him drink ammonia. So this drill instructor said, "Hey, look here, you cut me a deal, I'll tell you everything that I know that's going on." So he fabricated these stories. Mm-hmm. And the one for me and Hubbard, he told him that we had hid in the closet and solicited money. They'd come by and give us $10 a piece and go on. So, you know, we talked to the attorney about that and told him he wasn't even in our platoon. He was all the way on the other side of the barracks in another platoon. And so, you know, they talked about that. And they said, "We want every recruit that was in this platoon to be brought back to Parris Island, and we want to question every one of them. We want a statement from every one of them." Well, the judge took another break. By now, it's about 7 o'clock at night. He's gone 10, 15 minutes. He come back out, and he said, "Sergeant Brown has been released from the brig. All charges have been dropped. Everybody's free to return to duty." Well, that left kind of a nasty taste in my mouth about it. It did Hubbard and the others. And we went on back to duty. And it wasn't but about a month after that, they pulled me from the field and sent me over to 1st Battalion, where recruits went that had different defects, like they had to go to medical platoon or fat body platoon, whatever, or they'd been out there and come back and would go into a training day. We, you know, work out between the battalions where they went and all that. And I got disillusioned. I just had enough of the Marine Corps. I'd had enough of it. So then they pulled me out of there and sent me from B Company to A Company, which I did not want to go to. I knew some guys from school, but I did not want to be down there. And so they put me to work for this guy that I couldn't stand. And I think I worked a week. Then I went down and told the chief drill instructor for that company, I said, "I quit. I'm not training recruits anymore. I've had enough. I'm going to hurt somebody. I'm done." So they said, "Okay." So I turned my belt in. So they made me laundry sergeant for down there. Going to really punish me, you know. But that was great, because on laundry day, I'd back a truck up. The recruits would throw the laundry on. They'd get on the truck. We'd go to laundry. They'd throw the laundry up. I'd take them back, drop them off, and I was through till 4 o'clock that afternoon. So every day I went out to the golf course and played golf every day. My golf game got great. And so I'd made my mind up. It's time to go.
Yeah.
Time to go.
So, you got out of the Marine Corps at that point? How long had you been in at that point?
I got out on June 3rd, and if I'd have stayed until August the 7th, I'd have had 8 years.
Okay. Okay, and when you got out, you were where? In
Beaufort, living in Beaufort, and stayed in Beaufort.
Okay.
The day I got out was interesting. I was punished. Well, I wanted to go to school. Mm-hmm. So I put paperwork in to go to school, and they said no. Critical MOS. I said, I'm not a drone instructor anymore. I'm not critical. Well, the battalion commander, he didn't like me. I didn't like him, and the sergeant major was a weakling. He didn't take up for any of his drone instructors. And so one day I'm moseying along, and I run into this captain, and I had gotten him orders. I was the admin chief. I never had admin training when I reported in at Lejeune. First sergeant made me admin chief because I come off embassy duty, and he sent me to school and stuff. So anyway, long story short, that guy was a lieutenant, and he come to me, and he'd asked could I help him get some orders somewhere. So I called to a friend of mine at division, got him orders, and he got sent there. Well, I run into him at Paris Island about 4 years later, and remembered him, and he remembered me, and we got to talking, and he said, what are you doing? I said, well, I've decided to get out after these years. I'm ready to go. I want to go to school. And I put in for an early out within 90 days of my EAS for school, and they've turned me down twice. He said, I tell you what, he said, go back and put it in again. But you tell them you're going to hand walk it through this time. And they'll have to let you. So I said, okay. He said, don't worry about a thing. He said, I don't care. He said, your battalion company commander can say no, your battalion commander can say no, your regimental commander can say no, but I work for the commanding general, and when it hits me, I'll stamp it approved. So carried over, and he stamped that thing approved, and he said, released within 5 days. Man, I was tickled pink. I done had a bad taste of Marine Corps in my mouth.
Right.
And so I took it back, and the sergeant major, who to me was just wasn't worth killing. He might have been a really good man at one time, but and our battalion commander, he was. I can't say no more about that.
Yeah.
But so the day I got out, they gave me my checkout papers, and I went and did all my checkout in 2 days, and came back, and sergeant major said, come back tomorrow, we'll get you your discharge paper. So I said, okay. I showed up at 7 o'clock in the morning with my drone instructor hat on and then my C's, and sat there and sat there and sat there till 11 o'clock that night.
Wow.
And the clerk came out and gave me my discharge papers. Well, I was so mad, and and stupid. I took all my Marine Corps clothes and everything I had and took it out and threw it in the trash. I was done with it. Man, from that day on, I've regretted every moment of it.
Yeah.
I was mad at an individual, not the Marine Corps.
Right.
But I had a good career, and enjoyed that.
I've known Paul for 32 years and have always enjoyed any time that I've been able to spend with him. I've also been able to call him family. Paul and I both would like to ask that if you're a veteran and you're experiencing any difficulties, be it physical or mental, please contact the VA. You'll be glad that you did. Thank you for watching this video, and if you enjoyed it, please hit the subscribe button and don't forget to hit that bell so that you'll be notified whenever we do an upload, and we generally do one each and every week. Don't forget our sister channel over at K&A Ranch, and if you like those videos, please hit the subscribe button and ring that bell as well. Always remember, every trip starts with a step, and that step, well, it starts with you.